All right, we're going to get started. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Christy Alexander. I'm the Family and Community Engagement Liaison for Community Services. We also have Ashley Croson, who's the Director of Community Services. She could not be on with us today. And then Rebecca Wigington, we partner with her and collaborate with her on topics to present to the community. But we also love to hear from you guys on topics or ideas you'd like to discuss as well. We have some upcoming sessions. We have another one this Thursday, Gifted After High School. And that's with our Advanced Academics Coordinator, Carrie Lockhart, to give ideas and opportunities for gifted students to continue developing their talents after high school. We also have another one next week, Setting Healthy Boundaries with Grant Halliburton Foundation. It's to explore the importance of establishing personal boundaries, what those may look like, and how to maintain them where and when there may be some pushback. And then today's presentation is Navigating School and Peer Relationships. And Dr. Sharp, he is one of our counselors, the elementary campus. He will be presenting to us today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to him. Let me stop sharing my screen and let's see. You should be able to share your screen now.
All right, very good. Before I get started sharing my screen, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, and thank you for that introduction, Christy. I am Dr. Jason Sharp. I am the school counselor currently at Lindsay Elementary. I'm also the lead elementary counselor for Allen ISD. And so I coordinate with Rebecca Wigington and all of our elementary counselors as we develop our comprehensive counseling programs across the district. And I'm excited to be here presenting to all of you today about how your children interact with other peers in schools, how they build those friendships that are so important. And then also we'll spend a little bit of time towards the end talking about how they interact with teachers and maybe provide some helpful tips for you as parents on some things that you can do with your children to improve those teacher-student relationships, or ultimately what we hope will happen is that they become more comfortable in advocating for themselves in the classrooms as they continue to grow and develop. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to share our presentation today.
I'm going to jump in real quick. I forgot to say, we're going to do questions at the end. So if you have any questions, you can just drop them in the chat and then we will get to those at the end.
All right, fantastic. All right, so what we hope to accomplish during the presentation today is that the information I provide to you will help you to understand better the friendship and social development of your children during their elementary years. We're going to spend some time talking about some common peer dynamics and also, as I mentioned, touch a little bit on some of those student and teacher dynamics. And then the takeaway today, I hope, is that you will be able to learn how to foster resilience in your children and also support their social skill development at home. It is important to understand that the relationships that your children form with their friends are vitally important to their development. Their first relationships are going to take place in the home with the family dynamic and their family of origin. But outside of those relationships, their peer relationships are going to be the most important. Building those relationships with their friends helps them to build confidence and gain a sense of belonging. It also helps to support academic success when they're surrounding themselves with friends who are also focused on doing well in school. That helps to develop their school identity. And we have found through research that that increases their academic performance. Those friendship relationships also help them to learn empathy, to practice conflict resolution and communication skills. They do those things in those family relationships as well, but it's not the same. It doesn't look the same. It doesn't sound the same. I think about my own 15-year-old son, and I guarantee you, he does not work through conflict with me the same way that he works through conflict with his peers. He doesn't communicate with me in the same way that he communicates with his peers. And so by focusing on those peer relationships and working with our children to help them develop that empathy and those communication skills in multiple settings, not just with grown-ups, but with also peers of the same age, helps them to be able to generalize from situation to situation and use the most appropriate communication in each of those settings. In order to better help our children work through and navigate those relationship obstacles that they're inevitably going to face, we need to have a baseline understanding of their social development. And so our youngest friends, our kindergartners and first graders, they are focused on learning how to share and developing an understanding of cooperative play. Younger than that, what we typically find is that kids engage in what's called parallel play. They may be doing the same thing as someone else that's in the same room, but there's not always a lot of interaction. I'm doing my thing, you're doing your thing, right? In kindergarten, when we put them all together in the same room, they get used to the structure of a well-defined routine. They work through stations. They do have some free time and playtime at recess. They begin to develop what it looks like when they're cooperating with other people. And if you have a kindergartner or a first grader, you know that that doesn't always go very smoothly, right? They're not always willing to share. They sometimes struggle as they work through that process. When they get to be in second grade or third grade, they start to gain an understanding of what a best friend really is. In kindergarten and first grade, I'm friends with everyone. Everyone's my best friend. We have the same shoes, we're best friends. You like the same snack that I do, we're best friends, right? But when we get into second and third grade, they start to differentiate. Best friends start to take on the role of someone who has the same interests that I do, right? Likes the same things that I like, does the same things that I do, is in my class or travels with me as I rotate from class to class. So it starts to become more narrowly defined. Our friendship circles shrink a little bit. Second and third grade, we also start focusing on what's fair, right? And then when we move into fourth and sixth grade, parents, I hate to say it, but this is probably going to be the first time where your opinion matters less to your children than their peers' opinion does. And that's a normal part of development. That's going to happen. It's frustrating, right? Believe me, as a parent of two kids, I get it, right? But if you have an understanding that that's going to happen, you can be a little bit more prepared on how to deal with it when it does. Something that children are also learning in their development in fourth through sixth grade is understanding the different roles that individuals play within a peer group. There's not equality within that peer group. There's often an imbalance of power. And the quicker that kids can understand that, the better they are to navigate through those peer groups. So if we want to promote healthy friendships with our children, we need to have an understanding of what healthy friendships should look like. In a healthy friendship, there should be mutual respect. There should be kind communication. That doesn't mean that peer groups are always going to get along or that friends are always going to get along, but when they communicate with each other, there needs to be kindness. Healthy friendships have an understanding of how to work through conflict resolution. And it doesn't mean that anytime there's conflict, we run away from each other. It also doesn't mean that anytime there's conflict, I'm right and you're wrong. Friendships, healthy friendships, develop an understanding of how to communicate with each other when things aren't going as smoothly as we'd like them to. Healthy friendships also create a sense of feeling safe and included. And healthy friendships are flexible. There's an understanding of how to share, how to take turns, how to look at things from a different perspective. I mentioned earlier on that we're going to take a look at some common peer dynamics. Friendship relationships are not always going to look like this, but these are some common things that you can expect as your children begin to develop and age through those different friendship scenarios. The most common friendship dynamic is the fact that friendships are going to be changing all the time. Friendships go through cycles, right? We grow up with people in our early years and they're in our classroom and they're our friends. And then as our interests begin to change, our friendship dynamics begin to change. And what we sometimes see is that strong friendships weaken over time, and then maybe they come back together again and they strengthen again as children move through these different peer bubbles and peer groups as they continue to old. Friendships also drift apart. Just like they drift closer together sometimes, you may have someone in your class that you're not really connected with, and then children get older, and then we drift together because we identify common interests. That's why communication is so important. But then we also drift apart. And children who may have been our child's best friend for years, maybe because they're a neighbor, maybe because you're friends with the parents, and so your children naturally become friends. Then as their interests change, then they can drift apart. Also, it's pretty common in friendship relationships that there will be periods of inclusion and exclusion. Again, as those interests change and as loyalty shifts. Children struggle sometimes with understanding where loyalty should be placed. And it's not always a basis of who I've known the longest or who makes the best decisions. Sometimes loyalty shifts based on perceived popularity. Right? Sometimes loyalty shifts because of a student who is funnier or gets more attention in class. And even as parents, when we would prefer that our children shift their loyalty elsewhere, we're not in control of that all the time. We can encourage, we can support, we can teach, we can coach. Right? But the sooner we realize we're not in ultimate control, the better of a position we'll be in to be able to help encourage our children to make those right choices with the control that they have. I mentioned earlier that there are some common peer dynamics where power isn't always shared equally across a friendship relationship. In healthy relationships, it is. Where we start to see some struggles is when that power imbalance presents itself. And we sometimes call it bossiness. We sometimes call it being controlling, right? In competitions, as friendships, children are going to compete with each other in lots of different things, clothing styles, out at recess, performance in the classroom. And when that happens, inevitably there are feelings of inferiority that come through when our children don't perform as well as other children in class, or as well as their friends do, or if their friend gets something that they don't get, or has a privilege that they don't have. And those power imbalances are difficult for children to navigate through. And then the last one is miscommunication of both meaning and intent. In my family, we have a rule where we always assume positive intent. If they are our friends, or they are our family member, or they are loved ones, right? If we assume positive intent first, then when our feelings are hurt or when there's conflict, it makes it easier for us to address that issue because we believe that both sides are coming at it with the desire to continue that relationship. If we assume negative intent first, that's where we have problems in friendship relationships. That's when friendship relationships get tough, because when that happens, when you assume that someone else hurt you on purpose, then your likelihood to follow through with that communication diminishes. I don't want to talk to them, right? Because they don't like me, or they were mean to me, or they hurt my feelings. Lots of times when I have students come and visit with me in my office, the first thing I ask them is, well, did you talk to them about it? Well, no, why would I want to do that? They just hurt me, right? That's where those friendship relationships can break down. And so as parents, we want to support them through that communication process. And we cannot assume that they know how to do it. We have to teach them how to do it and support them through that awkwardness. I don't know about you, but even as a grown-up, there are conversations I don't like having. There are people I don't want to talk to, right? But oftentimes, those are the people I really need to have the conversation with instead of going to someone else to say, hey, how should I deal with this, right? Well, you should probably deal with it with the person that you have the problem with, right? That's a skill, and it takes practice to get there. It's not something that we're born with. If you haven't figured out already, based on the information I've shared, friendships are hard, right? Making friends is hard. And then once you've made friends, it doesn't stop there. The work doesn't stop. You don't go into cruise control. Keeping those friends is hard too. Our children struggle with feeling shy and inadequate. Some of our kids struggle with impulsivity, right? And when you're an impulsive child who maybe lacks a filter or doesn't always say or do the right thing in class, it's difficult to draw people to you in order to increase the pool of individuals from which you can draw your friends. It's another reason why our kids hold on to friendships so tightly, particularly if they're struggling in areas of being shy or impulsive, because there's this understanding. They know that they don't have a whole lot of kids to choose from, right? That pool of people that they can pick their friends from shrinks when they're shy and not comfortable talking to everybody, or when they make impulsive decisions in the classroom that might encourage other friends to create distance rather than closeness. Transitioning between schools and environments, between grade levels, between teachers, that all makes things even more complicated and difficult too. And then when you throw in cultural and language differences, it's no wonder that one of the most common things that kids present in counselors' offices across elementary campuses with is that they have a hard time making friends. They feel alone. They feel like they don't belong because they're not connected. But let's say they work through all of that. They figure it all out and they form some good, strong friendships. Well, now they have to worry about keeping them. They have to deal with feelings of jealousy in friendship relationships. If they've never learned how, they're going to have a hard time apologizing when they mess up. Some of our children have a hard time acknowledging that they even messed up in the first place. But then once you help them understand that they may have made a choice or an error in judgment in that friendship relationship, holding themselves accountable and actually approaching the individuals with which they need to make it right is a very complicated task. Right? Sometimes children overreact because they haven't figured out how to take someone else's perspective and see it from a different direction. Children, especially younger children, are used to seeing things in black and white and not along a continuum. It's either right or it's wrong. And it doesn't matter what the wrong is, all wrongs are equally as catastrophic. And so they tend to overreact. That makes keeping friends hard too. I'm never going to be your friend anymore because you didn't play with me at recess today. Right? And then sometimes kids have trouble compromising because they know the things that they like and they feel very strongly about the things that they like. They know how things should be done. If you've ever had a conversation with a teenager, I know we're talking about elementary, but it happens younger too. They know what's right, and you couldn't possibly know any better than they do. They talk to their friends that way too. No, this is the only thing we can play at recess today. This is the only place that we can sit at lunchtime, right? This is the only way to do this group project in class. So you can see where those difficulties would present themselves and why we say friendships are so hard. The other part of friendships being hard is we only control half. We only control 50% of the relationship in a friendship, right? And our kids don't always know that. They don't always understand that. So often they want to try and control what someone else is doing, and to teach them and to help them understand that they can't, no matter how hard they try or how bad they want it, is part of our job as parents. And the sooner we can get them to that place, the easier it's going to be for them to navigate these friendship relationships. So here's the good news. There are things that you can do to help them. And I cannot stress this point more emphatically. Your job is to be their coach. You are a parent, and I'm not taking that away. But your job is not to fix the problems for them. Okay? Conflict is normal in every relationship. Growth happens through conflict. Without conflict, there can be no growth because there's no motivation to address anything if things are going smoothly, right? And so we're never going to reach above or beyond where the current level of our relationship exists if there isn't conflict. And so we need to teach our kids how to do that. And then when they experience conflict, we need to coach them through it. It's not our job to fix it. Okay? They need to figure out how to do it. Or else, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, we're not teaching them resilience. We're not building that capacity or fostering resilience. We're creating something else. So what I'm encouraging you to do is to take the mindset of a coach. You're going to coach your kids through these problems in their friendship relationships instead of trying to fix them. And that's hard. You can teach your children to use I feel statements when there is conflict. Because of what's happening here, this is how it's made me feel. Instead of pointing the finger outwards, we point the finger back, right? We teach our children to listen to someone else's perspective. Our ears are one of the most effective problem-solving tools that we have. How to repair relationships with apologies, right? We teach them to understand the value of saying, I'm sorry, right? And that we can start there. even if it's a misunderstanding, even if it's a miscommunication. Okay. What we can do is we can teach our children to come back to that relationship and say, hey, I can tell that the way you reacted was not the way that I intended. And what can I do to help communicate with you better so that this doesn't happen again? Right? That's what it sounds like. And then parents, we can teach our children to understand and accept that not all friendships last forever. We find that it becomes easier. They become stronger in their own identities. And when those shifts and cycles and drifts happen in those natural, pure relationships, our children are better able to transition through that. Okay. How can you support a healthy friendship at home? I mentioned it earlier, and so I'm going to reemphasize it here. You can model for your children what it should look like. Those family relationships at home are vitally important to our children's social development. What they see is what they practice, right? And so if we model for them what respect looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like to be respected and to show respect, then they will take that and model that same behavior and those same communication styles with their peers. And if they're having a hard time struggling to figure it out, a role play is your best friend at home. I love role-playing conversations with my children. And my favorite thing to do is to take on the role of my child and have my child practice in the role of the person they have conflict with. Younger friends have a hard time with that. Kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they can struggle. So maybe you need to play the role of the friend. But as they continue to get older, they gain an understanding of the difference of perspectives, and having them practice out what their friend might say and you echoing back what your child sounds like can be really revealing to them in that relationship and to help them gain insight as to where things went wrong, whether it's on something that they control or something that their friend controls. And then it gives them something to build off of when they come back together and communicate to try and fix it. What you can do at home with healthy relationships is you can also encourage reflection. Asking your children to think about, is that something you control? Is there something that you could have done differently? Right? Is there another way to look at this situation? Is a great question that I like to ask, because our children focus on their own perspective. It's their world and it's their truth, but someone else might see it differently. And so when they get to a point where they can, we're talking probably middle third grade. How do you think your friend looked at this? What do you think they saw? Is there another way to look at this? Right? And then we encourage empathy, right? Thinking about how someone else might feel in that situation. Asking our children, have you ever been in the same place before? What did that feel like? So how do you think your friend feels? We also want to be careful about labeling children. I don't want you to play with them. They're a bad kid, or that's a bad kid, right? Instead, as parents, because here's the thing. Remember I said earlier, there's going to come a point where your opinion matters less than what peer opinion matters for your children in their peer groups and their friendship groups, right? So we want to be careful about labeling children. Instead, label behaviors, label choices. That behavior is not something that we support in this household. Okay, that's not a choice that we would encourage you to make. Okay, when your friend did this, that behavior caused you to feel a certain way, right? So we focus on the behavior and the choices rather than the permanence of a label applied to another individual. Because just like we hope our children have the power to choose and to change, we also want the same for their peers and the belief that those choices can change. I mentioned earlier that resilience is really important, and it's our job as parents to foster that resilience, because if we don't, instead, we're fostering dependence. If we always try and jump in and fix every problem that our children deal with, then they're going to start looking to us to fix the problem before they ever attempt to address the issue on their own. Okay? Instead, we want to normalize mistakes. We learn from mistakes. Similar to conflict, when everything's right, there is no incentive to improve. Right? But when we make mistakes, we need to understand it's not the end of the world, and we need to help our children understand that too. right? No one is perfect. They are going to make mistakes, and we need to normalize that process. Through mistakes, we grow and improve, right? We don't want to ignore mistakes either. We want to help our children reflect on what the mistake was, where they went wrong, what choices could they have made differently instead of the one that they made. Have them think about what might have happened differently if a different choice had occurred, and then give them the freedom and the encouragement and the support to go out and test that new choice. And if it works, fantastic. If it doesn't, and another mistake happens, bring them back and start the process all over again. That's called learning. We also want to help our children by teaching them coping skills, how to deal with disappointment, how to deal with frustration, okay, how to work in a group when things aren't going the way that you want them to, how to advocate for themselves, whether that's with a peer or what we'll mention here in just a second, with a teacher. Okay? We want to be sure we celebrate effort, not popularity. It's not about how many friends your child has, right? It's about the effort they put into that relationship. Right? A lot of times, even as adults, we have individuals that we consider to be inside of our circle. We might call them friends, right? But if we stop and reflect on the amount of effort or energy that we're putting into those friendship relationships, I would be willing to bet a majority of the time, if you're feeling distance in a friendship relationship, it's equal to the amount of energy or effort that you're putting into it. And so when our children are struggling, and we help them identify where the struggle is, where the obstacle is, and then they make an attempt to try and correct the issue, even if it doesn't work out, celebrate the effort, right? So that they're more likely to try it again next time with that same peer relationship or a different peer relationship. Okay? And then we want to encourage problem solving. Okay? We want to help our children understand that the solution is not always going to be easy, that they might have to break it down into steps, right? That they can analyze where things went wrong and what their options are moving forward. We're not going to try and fix it for them. We're not going to just give them the answer. We want to see if they can come up with the answer on their own and then apply it. We want to make sure that in our household, we're supporting the necessary social skills that our children need to develop in order to be successful in these peer relationships that we're talking about in school. One of the things that I love to do is have family conversations at dinner, and everyone talks, right? And it can be about any topic at the dinner table. Doesn't matter, doesn't have to be scripted. Having those opportunities for communication with each other encourage that interaction. Right? We talk about the things that went well during the day, and we talk about the things that didn't go so well during the day. This is the prime opportunity for you to model what we were talking about earlier. Problem solving, encouragement, conflict resolution, choice making. If you play games with your children, games are an excellent way to help build and support social skills, particularly games that require you to take turns. Okay? I don't know what the philosophy is in your house, but in my house, if you're going to win a game, you're going to know that you earned it. I don't let my kids win. That may not be a very counselor way to approach things, but I can tell you that when my kids beat me in a card game, when they beat me in a board game, right, there is a sense of accomplishment and pride that comes from that because they know I didn't let them, right? That teaches them that understanding that effort and reward often go hand in hand. They're going to work hard for something. And if they don't get it one time, then we're going to talk about where they could do something differently the next time around, right? It also encourages that cooperative process that's so important in that peer relationship building, right? So we want to play games that allow them to take turns. They don't always get their way. Doing cooperative chores, right? And that we have the benefit in our house where we have two children. So a lot of times when we designate chores that need to be done, we have them work together and accomplish those chores together. And they figure out who does what part of that chore. Maybe you've only got one child at home. Guess what? That means you're the other half of that team. And so you get in there and you work through those chores with your children and you have those same conversations. What are you going to do? Okay, I'll do this part. Let's come back together and see if we accomplish the task. Okay. How can we do it efficiently? How can we work well? What about if we disagree on the best way to go about getting the chore done, or which chore we should start with and which chore we should end with, or which kid has to pick up the poop in the backyard, right? Have everybody work together. That's how they navigate through those conflicts. And it's really important, right? It means that we've got to do some work too. We also want to teach our children how to practice gratitude and empathy. And where that starts is with us, right? It is vitally important that you tell your children thank you. It is crucially important that you reflect to your children and let them know that you understand how they're feeling, even if you disagree with the reason why they're feeling that way. When we teach and model gratitude and empathy, our children learn to practice gratitude and empathy. And then those skills translate into the relationships that become increasingly important for them as they grow and develop. Their friends and those relationships with their teachers. Okay. We've been focusing on peer relationships primarily up to this point, but I do want to touch on student-teacher dynamics, because outside of the family relationships and their peer relationships, for the next however many years our children are in school, they're going to have to engage with their teachers in class. And the more comfortable they are in doing that, the more successful they're going to be in developing those student-teacher relationships to their advantage in their academic progress. So some common student experiences. When you talk to students, these are kind of the things that they typically struggle with, or even as parents, we identify that they're struggling with, even if they're not aware of it. The first is that they're seeking approval from their teachers. Typically, in a relationship where there is an unequal distribution of power, the individual that has less looks for approval from the individual who has more. Our children seek our approval as parents. They also seek the approval of their teachers. Less popular students try and seek the approval of more popular students. Even if we wish it wasn't the case, it is the case, right? Our children are often afraid of making mistakes. And so that affects that dynamic, that relationship. Okay? Teachers teach differently and expect different things. In kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they typically don't change teachers. But they're going to have specials teachers who expect different things. They're going to have administrators who might expect different things. And so they sometimes struggle when they compare those different expectations. How come I can do this in one classroom, but I can't do it in another classroom? Oftentimes, our children, as they're learning those communication styles, they misunderstand tone or feedback. Our older children, once they have those devices in their hands and the use of technology, lots of misunderstandings occur, right? In text messaging and in emails, right? Fortunately, our younger friends don't have to deal with that as much, but the older they get, the more they will. And then they also, when they move, as they develop between kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and on up, there is a struggle as they transition from a more nurturing environment, like a kindergarten or first grade class, to more structured classrooms. That isn't to say that structure doesn't exist in those younger classrooms, but the way that students describe their teachers in early elementary as opposed to late elementary tells you a lot about how they're viewing the relationship in the classroom. And all of these things affect the way that they interact with their teachers. So what can you do as parents to help them through this process, through this transition? Well, you talk to them about how teachers teach differently. Okay? Mom sometimes expects different things than dad does. Why is it unreasonable to assume that someone's math teacher might expect something different than a reading teacher, or that a kindergarten teacher is going to expect something different than a first grade teacher, or even in third grade where you might have two or more teachers, they might not expect the same thing. We need to normalize that. Right? Because if we normalize it, then children start to think in those terms, and they start listening and looking for clues that will let them know what it is that those expectations are and how they differ from different people. We should also normalize accountability. Children make their own choices. I don't care how old they are, and I don't care how much you wish they made other choices. They are going to make their own choices. You cannot control it. You can coach it. You can encourage it. You can support it, but they ultimately have the choices that they make. And the earlier that we can teach them to be accountable for those choices, the more, believe it or not, they are going to feel independent to make those choices because they're theirs. They're making them because they choose to, because it's within their control, right? And then we also need to normalize a growth mindset. Things are not stagnant. They do not stay the same, right? I'm having a lot more conversations with my wife about how I wish my kids would quit growing up. No matter how many times I talk about it, they are going to continue to grow up and they're going to do more adult things, right? And so we need to teach them how to have a growth mindset. Things are going to change. Peer relationships are going to change. The way that you communicate with a friend right now and it's working and you guys are great, one day you're going to communicate the exact same way and things are going to blow up. It's going to happen. So you have to change too, right? That's where we go back to empathy and communication skills and conflict resolution skills and asking what happened and where did I go wrong? And how come a high five yesterday was perfect, but a high five today sent you off on a tirade, right? Because things change. And we need to help our kids understand that. And that's not always easy. As adults, it's not always easy. So what do we do in these relationships? We teach our children to ask questions, and we teach them how to do it. We teach them to ask questions respectfully. Okay? We teach them about timing, right? The best time to ask a question in class is not when your teacher is in the middle of instruction, unless your teacher has opened the door. Miss Alexander today said, hey, we're going to hold our questions to the very end, right? And what I've noticed is that you all didn't unmute and start throwing questions out there, maybe because she didn't turn that feature on, right? But our kids don't have a mute button in the classroom. Teachers don't get the chance to push the chalkboard and say, okay, nobody gets to talk. So we teach them how to do that. We teach them about timing, how to ask questions respectfully. Number 2 is one that's really important to me, and I strongly encourage it be really important to you. Teach your children how to advocate for themselves when they need help, how to ask for it, and that it's okay to ask for it. Teach your children how to accept feedback. That when a teacher points out a mistake or an error or provides correction or constructive criticism, that your child is then not in a position where they start to break down and tear up and feel like everything is falling apart and they can't do anything right. Feedback is a normal process in any relationship. And so teach your children how to hear it. Practice at home. Provide them with feedback. One of my favorite things when I have students in my classroom, when we're having a conversation, we're working through a conflict that's come up. I love stopping the conversation and say, okay, what did you hear them say? Right? You'd be surprised how often what they think they heard isn't anywhere close to what it was that was just said. And that's because they're so focused on the idea of getting feedback, and it means that they've done something wrong, that their brain shut off the part that says, hey, this is what worked. And they only hear the negative. So teach them how to accept feedback. And that feedback doesn't mean that you have done things completely wrong. It means there's opportunity for growth. Practice responsibility. I promise you, your children can do more than you probably believe they can. And a lot of times we lower the bar of our expectations because we think that that's what our children are capable of. When we do that, when we model that behavior, they do the same thing in their peer relationships. They lower the bar. And sometimes they lower it so far where it no longer lines up with what we believe and support as a healthy friendship relationship. So don't lower the bar. Instead, practice responsibility and accountability. And then ultimately, see teachers as partners. Teachers in school can help with all of these things that we're talking about. They can help your students work through peer relationships. Your counselors can help your students work through peer relationships at school. Right? We do a lot of work on conflict resolution and peer mediation. And so see your teachers as partners, right? Develop that relationship with teachers. You give them to us for 8 hours a day. Allow us the opportunity to work with your children and to reinforce the things that are important to you at home and that you're working at home. Okay. So I don't know what your key takeaways are from the presentation today, but here's what I hope they are. I hope, number one, you realize that friendship struggles are a normal part of development. I hope that you recognize that social skills are teachable, right? They're not something that our children are born with. Not only are they teachable, but they need to be taught. And just like any other skill, the more you practice them, the better at them you will get. I hope that you understand that children need to learn resilience. And in order to do that, they have to deal with manageable challenges, right? If we jump in and we fix them too quick and they're never faced with those challenges, never have to manage them on their own, then they're not going to be able to develop that resilience so that when it does come time where you're not there to help them out, they can problem solve and figure it out. And lastly, but certainly not least, that our responsibility as parents, if we're going to help our children work through these peer relationships, we have to model what a healthy relationship looks like, right? What it feels like, what it sounds like, so that then our children will recognize it when they see it. And conversely, they'll recognize an unhealthy friendship relationship when that pops up too. All right. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm fairly certain that this presentation will be made available to you. At the end of it, I've included two pieces of information. One, my contact information. If you have any questions that we don't get a chance to answer today during our Q&A here in just a second, I would encourage you to reach out to me. I'd be happy to respond. My typical turnaround time, I shoot for 24 hours, but if I don't get back to you right away, I will do my best to get back to you within a reasonable professional time. I also included a couple of links here. The first link is to our Allen ISD Counseling Department website. If you have not had a conversation with your campus counselor, give them a call. Introduce yourself, right? They want to build that relationship with you. And the stronger that relationship is, the more likely they are to be able to assist your kids on campus if there's ever an issue. So use that counseling department website, find your campus, find your counselor, and reach out and say hello. The second link there is to childmind.org. I love this resource for parents for just about anything you can come up with that your kids might be struggling with. Childmind is a resource database of articles and research that are all peer-reviewed and can be a wealth of knowledge for parents with lots of different things. Testing anxiety. There's a section on friendships. Like if you go onto their website and you search friendships, there's lots of different things that you can do as a parent, depending on what your kid might be struggling with. But I love this resource, and I give it to my parents a lot. And then the last one there, if you ever find that your child is in a position where they might need to visit with a counselor or therapist outside of school, psychologytoday.com is a database where you can filter by geography, by insurance, or by content in order to find a mental health professional that might be able to help with your particular situation. So I hope you find those useful. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then we're going to jump into the Q&A.
Thank you, Dr. Sharp. This was wonderful and so relatable. I know it's so relatable to all the families. And, you know, as a parent, I think it's human nature to immediately want to jump in and fix things for your kids before you coach them. I mean, guilty. You know, I still do it to this day. And I learned a lesson early on with my daughter and her friend to try to help. And real quickly, I'm like, yeah, no, they're best friends again in 5 minutes. So I'm staying out of that one. But this has been really, really wonderful. So many relatable ideas and information and things to use, I think, that could help everybody. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
We do have one question right now. They said, I am witnessing some changes in my first grader that concern me. He has started being less talkative about school, wanting to get picked up early from kids club, and is distancing himself a bit. He is going through a I don't want to kiss you phase, and it makes me wonder if something happened at school that made him uncomfortable. How can I approach this? Is the I don't want to kiss you phase normal for this age range?
It's a great question. And anytime we recognize as parents, anytime we recognize changes in our children, it can cause some distress on us. And the same kinds of questions that you're asking here. What's changed? What's happened? This isn't normal. I want to offer some reassurance that when it comes to showing affection, that absolutely is a normal part of development. I can't necessarily say that there is a time when that occurs more often than others outside of as they grow up. Public displays of affection tend to, and I would say, and again, when I talk about normal, it is a continuum. It is a spectrum, right? And every child is different. Public displays of affection tend to be less popular as students get older. But also, too, a lot of that depends on how you normalize public displays of affection in your household, right? For a child to change in first grade like that, there could be a lot of different factors. It could be that he had a peer in school whose parents came to have lunch with him and they were saying goodbye and they went in for a kiss. And this peer said, "I don't want a kiss from you." And that peer might be one of their friends. And they're like, "Well, if they don't want to kiss, then I don't want to kiss too." Right? It may be something as simple as that. Right? Uh, I if it's something that is concerning to you, my encouragement, even with a first grader, is to say, "Hey, the other day, normally we hug and we kiss each other, and the other day, you said that you didn't want to kiss. Is something wrong? Did something happen? Is there a reason why you don't want to kiss from me?" And begin that conversation. If you want to, you can talk about why it's important to you to hug or kiss your children. My nephew is in, I guess he's in third grade right now. He's one of those kiddos that doesn't appreciate that kind of affection in that way. He likes high fives. He feels loved and validated with fist bumps. In the situation of my son, he likes my son to pick him up. But it's not about hugs and kisses. Our kids change, and there isn't any reason to think that your child won't go back to a place where he likes hugs and kisses. But I think it starts with a conversation. And I encourage being direct. I don't know that I would come in and say, "Hey, did something happen right away?" Right? We don't want to be suggestive, or we don't want to lead them in that direction. But just say, "Hey, I noticed that this happened and it caught me off guard. It was surprising. Is there a reason why you didn't want to kiss? Or is there a reason why you didn't want to hug?" Right? And then there's always, if you reach out to a teacher and say, "Hey, I'm noticing some changes in my child's behavior at home, things that they would normally do, they don't want to do anymore. Are you seeing some of the same things in class? Are you noticing any changes?" And kind of get some feedback there.
Thank you, Dr. Sharp. Okay, we have another one. What do you say to your children when they don't think one of their friends is a good influence on them?
Yeah, influential friends is a really tough conversation to have as parents, right? And so again, I want to refer back to, instead of labeling the child as a good influence or a bad influence, talk to your children about the behaviors. I don't know how old the child is that we're talking about, and that can make a difference too in the language that we use with our children. But I think instead we focus on the behavior. And what the idea behind that is, if you talk to your children about acceptable and unacceptable behaviors rather than acceptable and unacceptable children, then what we hope is going to happen is then they start to equate that themselves. If this is a behavior I don't like, and this is a child that engages in that behavior on a regular basis, then this isn't a child that I want to spend time with. Now, I say that. When they get to be a little bit older and it's less about what you think and more about what they think, and these children that might not be the greatest of influences happen to be more popular or seem to have more friends or wear nicer clothing or newer clothing or all of those things that go into status in school, they might gravitate in that direction anyway. What you're doing right now is you're laying the foundation, right? You're focusing on character in your own children and their ability to discern good choices from bad choices. And then ultimately we have to hope that they're going to make the good choice moving forward. You are the parent. And so ultimately, if your children aren't able to make those decisions on their own and stay away from those influences that you don't think are best for their development, you step in and say, "Hey, as much as I want you to be able to make this choice on your own, I am the parent. I'm not your friend. It's not about whether or not you like me. It's about my job to keep you safe." Then when those decisions really begin to affect the safety of your child, then you step in. And as much as I hate to do it, you assert your authority as a parent.
All right. We have another one. How can we help sorry, how we help kids with special needs like AU build healthy relationships. And then she also said, who are HSP?
Let's see. It helps if I can sometimes see the question too. I hear you, but I'm also a visual hearer, but I'm
Yeah.
also a visual learner too. And I don't see that one. Can you read that question again?
Yeah. How can we help kids with special needs like AU build healthy relationships? And then they also put, who are HSP?
Okay. So a lot of what we talk about today is applicable whether it is a neurotypical child or a child on the spectrum. Their ability to process that information and generalize from one situation to the next changes based on their capacity. But when it talks, the best thing that we can do with our children on the spectrum is to create social stories that align with their experiences. We can try and do some of that proactively, right? In anticipation of things they might experience. But a lot of times, what we're doing is we're reacting to situations that they deal with or don't deal with well, that they struggle through. Unfortunately, we experience this a lot on our campuses where children who are on the spectrum, they don't navigate social experiences well. They have a hard time picking up on social cues. What this does tends to separate them from peer groups, and they lack the understanding of why, right? And so we teach them. We talked about teaching earlier, and teaching is important no matter the nature of your child. But teaching becomes even more important with those friends who maybe won't be able to work through those situations on their own. And so, my strongest recommendation for working with children who are AU or who have special needs is to come up with as many different scenarios as you can that could potentially occur, that we know to occur through that natural development, and you role play. You role play what that looks like. You're basically giving them a script of what to do in those situations. And then when it does happen and they use the script, whether it works well or it doesn't work well, then you come back together and you work through it together. Okay, this is what we tried. How did that work out? Do we need to change our script a little bit?
Thank you.
I hope that's helpful.
I'm noticing in my child's relationship, it is becoming more materialistic. How do I explain to her that she doesn't need to give gifts to be this person's friend?
Yeah. So that's yes. First of all, that also is normal. It's a normal part of development. As we're building our friendship relationships and trying to identify what it is that strengthens a friendship connection, our kids are going to go through all different types of experiments to try and figure out what creates the strongest friendship. Sometimes it becomes materialistic, and if I give them something, they're going to be my friend. Or if I let them get in front of me in line, they're going to be my friend. Or if I share a snack with them, they're going to be my friend, or whatever it is. And then on the flip side of that, we have individuals who take advantage of that, right? If you give me your snack, I will be your friend. If you give me that pencil or that sparkly shiny thing, or the football, or you let me be quarterback, or whatever it is on both sides, then where we come in as parents is we teach them the value of the connection over the value of the thing, right? And so understanding that that's a normal process and they're going to do it, when it happens, saying, hey, what would happen? I like, what would happen if you didn't give them that toy? What would happen if you didn't give them that part of your snack? Or, well, they wouldn't be my friend anymore. Well, okay, then what would happen? How would you feel? Is there someone else then that you would go play with if you weren't playing with this person? You give them alternatives and present them with the understanding that they have options, right?
All right. Any recommendations regarding social relationships for an only child?
I maybe would need more information there. Are we talking about opportunities outside of school that they could do because they don't have a sibling at home? Are we talking about an only child who is struggling to build relationships with other people because they don't have a sibling and you see that as being different? I'm not real sure how best to answer that question. I think I need
Well,
a
we'll
little bit
see
more
if they
information.
respond back with
Okay.
answering some of that. And we'll move on to the next one.
Okay.
My kids tend to be quieter and more shy at school. How do I teach them to advocate for themselves? Is playing the best method? What about the imbalance at home? My husband and I are in charge at home versus where is their voice?
Right. So, working through shyness. So yes, role playing is a wonderful way to help children who are more shy to be able to learn how to advocate for themselves. And then you take it one step further at home and you give them opportunities for choice. Right. So when you talk about you and your husband being in charge at home, find opportunities where your children who are maybe more on the shy end of the spectrum can be in charge. Play a game where they get to tell you what to do and then you follow along through that, right? Give them the opportunity to feel like to experience what it feels like to shift that perceived imbalance of power, because shyness typically comes from that perspective that someone else is in charge and I'm not, someone else has more power than I do. And so if we can shift that perspective, we change that dynamic artificially at home and then talk about what that felt like. What did it feel like to be able to tell mommy and daddy what to do, or to give us an assignment and watch us follow through with that, right? Encouraging them in opportunities. See, this is hard too. When they've made a mistake and they feel like they've disappointed you, and all they're doing normally is they just listen to you, tell them what's wrong and what the consequences are. Flip the script there, change that around, have them start with what happened. Rather than you telling them what happened, ask them to tell you what happened. Instead of giving them a consequence, ask them to identify what they think is a fair consequence as a result of that. So giving them the permission, if you will, to exercise their voice in those situations when things are going well and also when things aren't going well can help them work through some of those obstacles that might impact their ability to exert themselves and to be assertive.
Thank you. She came back, the person that asked about recommendations regarding social relationships for an introverted child.
Okay. Yeah. So there are a couple of things that you can do uh, I'm trying to think about how the best way to phrase this, right? So sometimes you can manufacture relationships for the experience. You can't um, you can't force a relationship, right? But there are times when, like in a school, if we notice that an individual tends to be more introverted, we might partner them with an extroverted individual to see if there is an opportunity to model that behavior. Um, the same is true by putting multiple introverted individuals together to force them into a situation where somebody's got to engage or nothing is going to get done. I do want to validate, though, that being an introverted person is okay. Being shy is okay. We're all different. Believe it or not, I'm an introverted individual. I have to work really hard and expend a lot of energy to engage in different social settings. Being introverted means we recharge on our own. Right. That's really what it boils down to. When we talk about introverted and extroverted, we talk about where we get our energy from. A truly extroverted individual gains energy from crowds, from social settings, from being with other people. It energizes them. For me, I get tired. And so I recharge on my own. I need downtime. I need alone time. So if you identify that your child is introverted, make sure that you're building in opportunities for them to recharge. And then walk alongside them, encourage them in those whether it is in sports or in a hobby or with family, whatever it is, give them opportunities in those situations where there are multiple people around to be in control, to be able to exert their voice. Have conversations with teachers about encouraging them in the classroom to share in class. But at the same time, we all have our comfort zones, and being introverted is okay. And there isn't anything to say that given time, an introverted individual won't find opportunities or recognize the value in being able to voice and assert their opinion when it's needed. And what generally happens is we end up grabbing a balance from both sides. And they've actually termed it now as an ambivert. We can be both, right? We can find energy in both places. Sometimes it takes other individuals a longer amount of time than others. But yeah, you encouragement, support, role play, those are going to be your best tools.
All right, we'll do a final question here. Something you talked about early on. What or how do you tell your first grade daughter that it's okay when her BFF from kinder and now in first doesn't want to play with her anymore? We talk about inclusion, kindness, and give others personal space, but it still makes her sad when her best friend doesn't want to play with her at recess.
My first reaction is it's okay to be sad. Sad is a normal human reaction, normal human emotion to feeling disappointed. And we want to validate that feeling. You're right. It does hurt when someone who's been your friend for a long time has chosen to play with other people, right? The first thing that I can say is like, hey, how often does your child reach out to that other individual to see if they want to play, to ask them to play? Part of it could come from an assumption. I see this person choosing to play with other people, which then means they don't want to play with me, and now I feel sad. And so it could be a communication thing. If your daughter is actively reaching out to this other individual, say, hey, do you want to play with me? And this other child says, no, I want to play with this other group, right? Then the conversation shifts to, okay, that's normal. We normalize that behavior. Friendships change, right? Maybe you're not in class anymore. Maybe they're doing something different. So then we focus on, okay, who else could you play with? I love asking students who come and visit me in my office about feeling like they don't have a whole lot of friends. I'm like, okay, if you could be friends with anyone in your class that you're not currently friends with right now, who would you pick? Right? Okay, then we focus on that one person. All right, what would you say if that person walked up to you tomorrow and said, hey, how's it going? And we walk through that conversation and then we flip it. Okay, what would you say to them if you walked up to that person out of nowhere and just started a conversation? And so then we practice that process and we normalize it. And then we issue the challenge. Okay, is it possible that tomorrow at recess, instead of going to this friend that you had forever in kindergarten, you go find somebody new and see if they want to play and see what happens? And she might be sad, and that's okay, right? That's why we explain and we normalize that process. It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Part of life, isn't it? Unfortunately, sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, there are no other questions. So let me make sure. Looks like we're good. Well, thank you so much for this. It was fantastic. Fantastic.
Oh.
And I know everybody is going to want us to share this with them. So we will, if you're okay, we will share your slides and everything, put it on our website as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, just if there were questions that I didn't get answered, or if you need some more follow-up to something I might have said, please reach out and ask me. I would also encourage you to reach out, like I said before, to your campus counselors. Begin building that relationship. They are a wealth of knowledge, just as I am, and I know that they want to be available to you and to be able to help in any way that they can with your children. For anyone who participated today, thank you so much. I appreciate you supporting our counseling department across the district. We cannot do what we do without your support. We are a team, and we do have to work together. So thank you for spending your time today. And I hope you take something away from it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharp. This was fantastic. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.